Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome at another episode of the VPH webinar series. VPH, the International Society for In Silico Medicine, and we're very happy that today we're joined by a whole delegation of the European Commission's Joint Research Center to talk about accelerating in silico medicine innovation and discover their activities that they are doing and learn more about how we can help each other in achieving the adoption and uptake of digital tools in health and care. Now, before I pass on the floor to Sara Bridio, I would like to first introduce the four people that we have with us today, and then Sara will introduce what they are going to talk to us about. We will have different presentations, and after every presentation, there is the option to ask questions. So Sara is a project officer at the European Commission JRC in the Systems Toxicology Unit. She works on the use of in silico modeling in biomedical research and in the regulatory space there in order to support the translation of computational solutions into industry, but also clinical practice. She has a background at Politecnico di Milano, working on cardiovascular diseases, and she actually won the VPH Best Thesis Award at our last conference in Germany. The second speaker, the second person of the team that is joining us today is Elena Petra. She's also a scientific project officer at the JRC in the human health data and secondary use of data, focusing on those topics. Also to support the EU health policy implementation. She has a long experience in molecular cardiovascular diseases and has a background in PhD, postdocs, and studies at RWTH Aachen, in Imperial College London, and in the University of Aberdeen. Then we have Alexander Ribeiro, another project officer in the System Toxicology Unit, where he is focusing more on the translation and regulatory acceptance of these new approach methodologies, the NAMs. He has a PhD from Carnegie Mellon, and he has a long experience in regulatory science and drug development, and also the enabling technologies to advance aspects there, so the cells and the on-chip technologies. Then, last but not least, we have Mario Cereta, the team leader at JRC F7, so leading the digital innovation in life sciences and the factual GPT projects, and he's also the co-lead of the AI and data portfolio. He has a PhD from the University of Navarra and an MBA from the IESC Business School. He has a long experience in AI for surgical planning, medical imaging, and data analysis. So we have four slightly different profiles, but very complementary, and I'm looking very much forward to what they have to tell us about their activities. Now, we do encourage you to engage with the speakers and with their colleagues. As I mentioned, after every presentation, there is an opportunity to ask the burning questions. And then at the end of the webinar, we will have a longer Q&A provided there is time. Now, there's two ways to do this. You can participate by raising your hand to ask a question, at which point our manager, Martina, will enable your microphone and webcam so you can immediately speak up directly yourself. The other one is to submit your question in the chat where everyone, or where the moderator will then read them aloud on your behalf. So that will be either me or Martina. Okay, with this and without any further ado, I would like to give the floor to Sara to guide us for the next sessions.
Thanks a lot, Liz, first of all, for the nice introduction. I think I'm now sharing the slides in full mode.
Yes, correct.
Okay, thank you. So before we start with our presentation, let me say just a couple of words about the JRC for maybe those of you who are not so familiar with who we are and what we do. So the Joint Research Center is a Directorate-General of the European Commission, dedicated to scientific research, so science for policy. We provide independent evidence-based knowledge and science which support the definition of EU policies to positively impact society. The core strengths of the JRC are anticipation, so we provide the scientific foundation and knowledge on which future policies are built. Integration, so we put together scientific knowledge and policies affecting different areas and the fields to tackle today's complex challenges and impact. So we provide policymakers the tools to measure the impact of their policies. So the four of us here are all part of the Directorate for Health and Food within the JRC, and we are located in a nice location in Ispra, in the north of Italy on Lago Maggiore. And so Liz already introduced us and our background. So the presentation you will see today is my colleague Alexandre, who will talk about new approach methodologies, of which in Silico approaches are an example. Then Eleni will talk about the uses of health data and biomedical research, and Mario will talk about the AI supporting in silico medicine, and finally I will give a presentation focused on in silico medicine, how they can be used in the practice with a focus on digital twin. So now I will give the floor to Alex. Maybe he can become the presenter now.
Just sharing my screen. You can see the screen, right?
Yes, we do.
Great. Well, welcome.
Now
thank you
it
so
just
much.
went off your presentation. Now it's your presentation again.
Okay, good. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. Welcome attendees. And thank you for the opportunity to give an overview of the work that's being done at the Joint Research Center on advancing the adoption of animal-free new approach methodologies, NAMs. NAMs, new approach methodologies, are basically methods with the capacity to provide safety and mechanistic information without relying on traditional animal testing. So here you have in vitro, in silico, and other methodologies that are represented on this slide, and with the capacity to model certain aspects of human physiology. And for this reason, NAMs have the potential to replace, reduce, and refine tests with animals. So NAMs, they heavily rely on their context of use. And the last item that I'm going to talk in this presentation is about context of use, which is focused on how NAMs are used by the end users. And the field is overall transitioning to a changing paradigm where NAMs actually start to consist of the combination of different methods, where there's an in silico component that's combined with an in vitro component, sometimes to make sense of different sources of data. So in addition to this role of in silico tools, computational tools are also central for translating the results of NAMs into clinical predictions or in vivo predictions, but also to make use of available data sets, biological data sets, clinical data sets, to mechanistically qualify NAMs for the intended context of use. So the presentation goals today is basically to give an overview of the applicability scope of NAMs, describe the strategic role of JRC in this area, stress the need for mobilizing stakeholder collaboration around context of use, and map avenues of engagement and partnership with the JRC. On this slide, we give a brief overview of key European Union activities related to our research and innovation in NAMs. So we do believe that Directive 2010/63 on the protection of animals used for scientific purposes was a key event that led to all of the activities that we're going to be talking about today. One of the actions that resulted from this directive was the roadmap towards phasing out animal testing, which to my knowledge will be published in early June, followed by a meeting in Helsinki later in that month. The European Life Science Strategy heavily mentions NAMs as part of other technologies in this context of a three-phase approach to drive life science innovation, going from innovation ecosystems, following rapid market access for life science innovations, and boosting trust, uptake, and use of these innovations. The European Biotech Act also mentions NAMs, And we do understand that the EU startup and scale-up strategy can be critical for the industrialization of these types of technologies that normally start as startups. Regarding funding, we do know that there have been calls, and we've been participating, and we'll work with the projects that are funded by these calls. One of them is this call by EIC for translating disruptive new approach methodologies into practice, followed by also recently released and already closed call on Horizon Health, integrating new approach methodologies to advance biomedical research and regulatory testing. So talking about regulatory testing, the European Medicines Agency has been instrumental at driving innovation in this field by supporting developers of NAMs, such as in Silico tools, to make those tools into drug development tools through qualification processes. And one of these programs, qualification programs, is the Innovation Task Force, where we actively collaborate with the European Medicines Agency for this purpose. There are other agencies that are also contributing for NAMs. European Medicines Agency is one of them. In relation to the Joint Research Center mission that Sara presented earlier today to support EU policies to positively impact society, the European Union Reference Laboratory for Alternatives to Animal Testing received a mandate under Directive 2010/63 to develop 4 pillars of activities around the 3 Rs: to replace, reduce, or refine tests with animals. One of them being research and evaluation in this field, the other one being validation, dissemination, and promotion of non-animal methods in science. And we'll be giving more detail in a couple of slides. Overall, we do track the use of animals in the EU, and we do understand that most animal use is actually in basic research and translational applied research, followed by regulatory use that accounts for 13%, and routine production that accounts for 5%. And we also do understand that the use of animals in research is very dear, and European citizens are very sensitive to this subject. If you look at different initiatives that were initiated by European citizens, we have registered 129 initiatives since 2011, and only 10 of these petitions were actually successful at gathering more than 1 million signatures in 1 year. 6 out of 10 of these were about animal welfare, and 2 out of 6 were focused on the use of animals for research and regulatory testing. So one example is the one presented on the left bottom side of the corner of the slide, commit to a Europe without animal testing in the cosmetics field. We do understand that new approach methodologies impact industries beyond the cosmetics industry. It impacts the human medicines, products, medical devices, detergents, you name it. You have a vast list of products for human consumption and animal consumption here that can be impacted by the implementation and acceptance of NAMs. I do encourage the attendees to take a look at our recent status report of the Ural-Ekman laboratories on non-animal methods in science and regulation. And there you will see detail on how NAMs can enhance productivity, efficiency, and ethical standards. So just a brief summary, they can be more human relevant for biomedical research and assess product risk. They can be faster and be developed to be faster than other methods at predicting clinical outcomes. They can be developed to be scalable to ensure feasibility and sustainability of use. They can be mechanistic to improve predictivity and regulatory relevance of results. And they can be ethically preferable, and they are ethically preferable by supporting replacement, reduction, and refinement of animal testing. So the benefits to European citizens are obvious: safer products, more efficacious cures due to advanced modeling for scientific discoveries, implementation of regulatory and societal acceptance of non-animal testing, leading to a dynamic industrialization and market advantage to commercialize a competitive technology in a context of higher economic competitiveness and sustainable growth in chemical, biotechnology, and pharmaceutical sectors. all leading to long-term sustainability of the non-animal testing ecosystem. So completely aligned with these benefits, the European Research Area, ERA, action on NAMs is a project that initially started and basically is a project that has contributions from the different state members, basically key stakeholders from the different state members of the European Union, in addition to representatives from the European Commission, like the JRC representatives, and other European agencies. And we have different stakeholders, industry, government, academia, biotechs, that all together are divided into different streams of activity. One stream focused on developing NAMs, the other stream focused on streamlining qualification or validation, another one focused on promoting education, and the last one on raising awareness in this field. So the next couple of slides are focused on potential ways of collaborating with the JRC. And this is critical for NAMs in the Silico area, for example, in addition to others. So we do believe that, within the 4 pillars of activities that EUROLECVAM is leading on research, validation, dissemination, and promotion, there's room for collaborations and there's opportunities for collaborations, and we're looking forward to that. So regarding research and development, these activities relate to scientific development, assessment, regulatory science, and generation of evidence. And what I've done for this slide and for the slides that will follow this one, I've listed a bunch of activities that kind of describe what we're doing in these areas, and I've underlined critical opportunities to collaborate. So we do believe that participation in EU research partnerships and consortia, like the ones that are funded by Horizon Health and others, are an opportunity for collaboration, collaborating in the development of NAMs and integrated approaches. There's another area, the adverse outcome pathways, that is an area where we are leading a lot of the efforts in this field, and in silico tools are sorely needed to address many of the gaps in implementing this framework of adverse outcome pathways in risk assessment. We also have open lab scientific collaborations, and we provide access to shared infrastructure. So related to validation of alternative methods, these are activities that relate to testing, qualification, benchmarking, and regulatory acceptance of methods. And we see priorities here in collaboration in terms of submission of methods to be validated by EUROLECVAM. We do have a track record of interlaboratory and reproducibility studies, and in supporting for regulatory uptake of validated NAMs. And we do have several activities that will be presented after my presentation focused on in silico. In dissemination, this relates to activities where there's communication, training, education, and knowledge. So we do have a summer school where we welcome participants. We participate in academic webinars and training events, scientific workshops, stakeholder meetings. We disseminate publications, databases, and guidance dissemination. And we have activities on knowledge sharing platforms and community engagement. Promotion of non-animal approaches in science describe activities where we raise awareness, policy uptake, stakeholder engagement, and societal acceptance. So overall, we welcome collaborations in the promotion of the 3 Rs and NAMs across Europe, stakeholder engagement activities, and outreach to NGOs, academia, and industry. One example of engagement with the NAMs industry is a survey that's currently happening, a survey for European NAM-based companies, and we welcome anyone in silico, companies that focus on in silico solutions or that contribute anyway to the NAMs ecosystem to participate. The goal of this survey is to map the technology readiness and commercialization challenges faced by companies in this field. The results are expected to support evidence-based EU policy development to accelerate translation and make European companies competitive in this area. So this is a great opportunity for companies in the NAM ecosystem to contribute to future EU policy discussions, to raise and basically highlight difficulties, barriers to innovation they are experiencing, identify critical gaps, and help us find solutions, and also ensure that industry is represented. This is a brief, anonymous, and confidential survey. It has two sections, one for basically collecting company profile information, and then another one focused more on translational readiness and commercialization. If you're interested to participate, our email is being shared on the bottom right side of the slide. So this is the last part of the presentation before we wrap up for Q&A. It's about context of use, which is becoming more and more a consensual, essential requirement. Context of use was first defined in the context of drug development, and it's mostly mentioned in the context of drug development, but it's applicable to other sectors, the same principle. And it's basically the point of view of the end user, the circumstances under which the drug development tool is to be used in drug development and regulatory review. Context of use drives qualification, acceptance, and implementation of a drug development tool. And it can be defined and specified either by leveraging current drug development practices that rely on animal use, and we want to replace that with non-animal models, or it can be defined as unmet needs in drug development that no animal tools can address because they're not physiologically relevant or mechanistically relevant to address those needs. So in short, context of use dictates NAM's qualification criteria. Context of use can also impact standards for NAMs when appropriate. This is also valid to a certain extent to in silico tools. So we do believe that Houston, we have an opportunity to perform basically engagement between two sides of the coin of the NAMs field that until very recently rarely interacted with each other. On the one side, we have the NAMs developers that are, they know all the science there is to know about in silico tools, physiology, modeling. And on the other side, you have regulators that know everything there is to know about regulatory needs, but do not understand the science in the new approach methodology. And the folks that develop new approach methodologies also don't have training in drug development or experience in that. So normally there was this context of use conundrum that we're trying now to fight along with our collaborators to make sure that when we develop and qualify an NAM, the context of use is always present to make sure that it's impactful, that its qualification is accelerated, and its acceptance is actually implemented. So our activities in multi-stakeholder engagement, where we engage regulators, developers, and end users, aim to acknowledge that no single group has the right answer when it comes to defining context of use, so everybody contributes. We aim to devise structured and accessible schemes for meaningful engagement to figure out how co-creation in these multi-stakeholder alignment groups can actually work in practice to build an open science knowledge base tailored to support context of use and qualification. And the goal is to foster a healthy community approach to standardization of new approach methodologies towards specifying context of use and qualification. So an example of these multi-stakeholder alignment efforts that are happening right now is a discussion forum that's scheduled to happen next month at the upcoming European Organ on Chip Society annual meeting in Braga at the end of June. And this is being organized between us and the conference organizers, EUROX, as well as the recently formed Industry Alliance for Microphysiological Systems. We already have confirmed participants from different sectors, regulators, developers, pharma, academia, industry experts, and we do have a bunch of folks already from the in silico field, PBPK, QSAR, and other in silico solutions that have already registered and will participate. So the goal is to accelerate practical and effective applications for developing and specifying context of use for MPS technologies that more and more rely on in silico tools to make sense of the data that comes out of these in vitro tools. You can also send an email to the same address that was shared a couple of slides before. If you're interested to participate, do reach out, and then you will receive an invitation. So yeah, this is the end of my presentation. I hope I was able to convince you today that new approach methodologies have the potential to deliver superior science and ethics. One, by being faster, more human relevant, mechanistic, and scalable than animal tests. They have that potential. Number two, by being aligned with the European Union 3Rs mandate with the goal of a Europe without animal testing. I hope I was also able to convince you that in finding a clear context of use in collaboration with the end users is a key prerequisite for NAM applicability. In silico tools are critical for the qualification of NAMs, because they enable the translation of in vitro results to predictions of clinical outcomes. And at the JRC, we develop work in the NAMs field within 4 pillars of activities: R&D, validation, dissemination, and promotion of non-animal methods in science. And we do believe that these 4 pillars are the perfect setting for collaborations to develop, to qualify NAMs and lead to safer products, faster innovation, and stronger economic competitiveness in the European Union. So I would like to thank everyone for your attention, and I would like to open out the floor for any Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexander. For those who have just joined us, there are quite a few people that recently just joined. Feel free to post your questions in the chat or raise your hand so that Martina can provide you access to microphone and camera, and you can ask your questions yourself. There is also going to be a larger Q&A at the end of all the presentations in case you are lacking a bit of inspiration right now. Can I? Yes, I was going to actually ask the question that is now appearing in the chat. Alexander, when you showed the email address for the inquiries, the fact that you're sharing your screen, the message at the bottom was actually covering part of the email address. So maybe either you show it again, or maybe some of your colleagues can type it into the chat.
I can do it.
So that we have
I can type it in the chat. That's not a problem.
Yes. And then also maybe I can, it's not really a question, but more of a comment on the engagement with the JRC when we were writing the roadmap for the virtual human twin. At some point, there were a couple of iterations with the JRC with people from the broader unit, I think. And it was very valuable input, and it really helped to strengthen on the technical and on the conceptual side. The roadmap. So I can vouch, even though I don't have a NAM or an in silico tool that has been passed by you, it's definitely an added value. There is a question from Umara, who asks, does this include, for example, testing in silico modeling as pre-procedural planning tool, for example, to help tailor these models using regulatory inputs to make them more useful for clinical translation?
Yeah, that's a very good point. NAMs have a vast range of applicability, right? Both in preclinical testing that usually relies on animals, animal models, but also in informing, designing, and planning clinical trials. So basically in the clinical pharmacology field. So yeah, there's already a track record of publications in model-informed drug development where NAMs can be instrumental. You know, when I say NAMs, I say in silico models can be instrumental at combining different preclinical data that is physiologically relevant and therefore has the potential to predict clinical outcomes. So in silico models are definitely critical and have been used, and there's already a track record of publications in translating in vitro results physiologically relevant into clinical predictions. There's actually a field of that, and it's definitely an interest that we have in our unit and in the JRC.
Thank you. I think maybe part of this is also covered by the coming presentations.
Yeah.
They're further specifying their question. Has this been used for medical device testing or interventional procedures? So NAMs in that context.
I'll be honest with you. I come from the drug development side, from small molecules and biologics. So I've actually probably Sara may be the best person to answer to this question, because I believe her PhD was focused on that.
Yeah, no, in terms of our internal, probably the question was referring to what Alex presented. So our internal NAMS validation process that's been currently focused on NAMS for more use, yes, in the drug development of chemicals, safety assessment, field toxicology. So that's the scope of our current validation framework, let's say, process. Regarding instead, for example, digital twins or that kind of in silico medicine models used in for clinical, I don't see the question, so I don't remember, probably was referring to surgical planning or clinical decision making more in general. Yeah. So we have other type of activities going on. Maybe we can, if we interact with researchers, we can support them in identifying the suitable regulatory frameworks that can apply to that model. For example, what for example, to understand together what credibility framework to apply. That's something we can support with, for example. But the formal validation process that Alex was referring to was more related to that other type of application.
Yeah, thank you. And then maybe these are covering the questions. I do have one. The person who asked the question says, "Thank you very much." I have one question for myself. You categorically and systematically include in silico when you talk about NAMS. We've had discussions with other people within the European Commission that do not necessarily see it that way. So it seems to be somewhat of still a topic of discussion. Which could be important because, as you mentioned, it is mentioned in the biotech where in silico is included in the definition, but in other texts where they don't include a full definition, maybe they don't intend to include in silico. What is your position on this? Is there a way that you guys are trying to push this and you make this more uniform across the commission?
Yeah, you bring a very good point. The definition of NAMS has been evolving, not just in Europe, but also overseas, in the US and in other parts of the globe. And to my knowledge, in silico, in terms of official definitions, is already part of the definition, right? Not just, and it's not only part of the definition as kind of a political position, but it's also reflects the reality in the field. The development of context of use normally makes it difficult for a single in vitro output to satisfy all the requirements of the context of use. And many times, more and more, the in vitro output does not directly relate to a clinical or in vivo outcome, right? So that's where in silico tools have been coming up as solutions, right, to make sense of this data. But not just that, it's possible also to use all the results that exist in terms of toxicological predictions and toxicological testing and start actually making predictions based on structure and similarities. And that already exists. It's something that has been done now for several years. But also on the perspective of interpreting data, imaging is critical now in vitro assays. And a lot of stakeholders are developing imaging tools to get a lot of data and a lot of information from drug effects and toxicity, etc., safety assessment. And computational tools are critical for bioimaging and understanding of these images and processing of images and getting information out of it that can be predictive of clinical outcomes. The reality is there. To my knowledge, all definitions that I know include in silico as NAMS. And I do acknowledge that the definitions are constantly changing. 2 days ago, I attended a meeting by the FDA, and they also acknowledged that, right? That the field is evolving very fast in the last 5 years, and we do expect the terminologies may change. But I don't have any question, and I don't see any reason to doubt that in silico are definitely a key component, and they're here to stay.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I apologize for the flickering in my screen. Sarah, I think these are all the questions. Over to you again.
Thank you.
Now the mic is open. Okay.
Yes, that's better.
Yeah.
Okay, so hello from my side. My name is Eleni Petra, and today I'm about to present you the unlocking of the potential of using the health data in biomedical research. So I would like to start my presentation today by presenting you my personal PhD story. So in this slide, imagine that this is me. And at the beginning of my PhD, I was excited to investigate the proteomics of the cardiorenal syndrome, meaning that examining the proteomics of individuals that they had both cardiovascular and kidney diseases in parallel. And the research plan on paper was simple. The original idea was to use blood, heart, and kidney tissue samples of individuals that they had cardiorenal diseases and compare them to healthy controls by performing proteomics. So soon after, I discovered how painful it was to work with human samples. And because during my PhD, I had three main challenges. I faced three main challenges. The first challenge was to find the right human samples. The second challenge was to find the right number of samples in order to be able to support statistical my research. And the third challenge was to prepare all the paperwork and all the bureaucratic work with my supervisors in order to get all the approvals that we need to work with human samples. So after having several meetings with my supervisors, we had to rethink and reschedule my PhD. And the solution at that point was, so instead of using human samples, to use human health data, human urinary peptidomics data sets from databases. So after analyzing these data sets, and I investigated several molecular signatures related to the cardiorenal syndrome, I successfully submitted my PhD, and I also successfully published my results in scientific journals. So during my PhD studies, I had the opportunity to face the challenges of human samples, and I got the solutions by using human health data. So right now we are focusing on human health data, and we're having three main objectives. The first objective here at the JRC is to enhance human health data in biomedical research. The second objective is to examine whether we can use human health data as an alternative source to animal models in cardiovascular research. And the third objective is to support the implementation of the new EU regulation, the European Health Data Space, specifically focused on the secondary use of health data. Right now, we are exploring EU-funded projects that they utilize human health data. And in order to explore this, we are applying several questions. For example, what types of health data are used in biomedical research? Which disease areas are associated with these disease categories? Where are the data collected? How are they incorporated into the research methodology? Are the data available? And after the project has finished, where are the data deposited? And in order to address these questions, we so far reviewed more than 22,000 papers. And in this table, you can see the specific numbers per data categories. Now, my first question is, what counts as personal health data? And this definition is based on the new EU regulation. So personal health data are data concerning persons' physical or mental health, including information generated by the provision of healthcare services, genetic data that they can reveal information on the physiology and health of a person, and health determinant data, that these data can influence the health outcome, And these factors could be lifestyle, behavior, social factors, educational factors, and even environmental condition factors. There are several health data categories: data coming from the electronic health records, data from registries and biobanks, clinical and genetic data, including, for example, clinical studies, clinical trials, genomic, epigenomic, and all-omics data. Data generated by medical devices and mobile apps, and health-related administrative data. My next question is, why is it important to work with health data? What is the value of working with health data? So health data supports and improves biomedical research, personalized medicine, drug development. They can also drive innovation and inform clinical policy making. Health data generate health and social value because, for example, better or even new medical devices, medical practices, and evidence-based policies are developed. They can also provide scientific values by facilitating new scientific discoveries, economic values, because new jobs are created, especially in the field of data science, data analysis, clinical information, and AI. And health data can support the development of services to improve citizens' health. We are now at a transformative moment in the biomedical research, and the traditional approach was that when we have one scientific question, we have one experiment to answer this question. But nowadays, by using big data and the powerful AI tools, we can address many questions at once. Another important thing when we use health data in biomedical research is that researchers have to adopt the fair data principle, and overall health data could accelerate medical diagnosis, disease prediction, personalized medicine, drug development, and clinical decision making, among others. My next question is that even though we're having a lot of health data, why is still hard to use them? Because we are now facing still several challenges. One important challenge is the fragmented data landscape, including the fragmented data life cycle. The data quality is often poor, the absence of common standards, and the fragmented data infrastructure. Even though it is still difficult to capture real-time data. What is also another important thing is trust, because citizens must feel confident that their personal health data are in a secure and protected data environment. Otherwise, they will not offer their personal data for biomedical research. The lack of experts that they're having experience in working with data analysis, clinical information data, and AI. The number of these experts is still limited. The EU regulation is fragmented right now because each member state develop and apply their national laws for personal data. So we cannot exchange our personal data from one country to another. And finally, researchers that they want to apply and obtain access for getting several data sets from registries or biobanks, they have to wait a lot of months. It's a time-consuming process. So for all of these challenges, the new EU regulation, the European Health Data Space, is willing to give solutions. The European Health Data Space regulation was officially published a year ago, and it has three main objectives. The first objective is the primary use of data, where citizens can have access and control their own personal health data, and they can also transfer from their personal data from one EU country to another. The secondary use of health data is where we can reuse health data for research, innovation, and policy making. And also there is one objective that is going to be for the first time in Europe. They are planning to create a single market for the electronic health records systems. So overall, the European health data space is not an isolated regulation. It is based on pre-existing EU regulation, including the Data Act, the AI Act, and the GDPR. What is really important is that in order to improve the quality of data, the fair data principle must be applied, and new data exchange infrastructure will be developed for both primary and secondary use of data. And the EU now is funding several projects for health-related topics, including the quality of data and the infrastructure. And with this, I would like to sum up my presentation today, giving the key takeaway messages that health data drive research, innovation, and public health policy. They could accelerate medical diagnosis, personalized medicine, and improve disease prediction models, and inform clinical decision making. We are still facing several challenges, including, for example, the data quality, the lack of common standards, the fragmented data infrastructure, and the new the new EU regulation, the European Health Data Space, is willing to address these challenges by giving a clear definition about the personal health data, and by creating a secure environment for primary and the secondary use of health data. And with this, I would like to thank you all. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take them.
Thank you, Eleni. While people are ruminating over questions, maybe I can start. You mentioned at some point in your PhD journey that it was very difficult to obtain data. Do you think that with the European Health Data Space, this is really going to be much easier? Thinking about, but also, well, maybe in 10 years' time, but now at the short term, thinking about how the data now sits in the hospitals, that there is really there's no personnel to actually do curation or to prepare the data to align with all of these new standards or the approved standards. Will it not be a minimal effort? Is there no risk that it is going to be a minimal effort, that hospitals are going to do just what is needed to avoid fines, but then that it's more about registry data that is already somewhat accessible, that will be the main body of data that we can access?
Do you mean by the European Health Data Space?
Yes, sorry, yes, in the context of the HDS, yes.
Okay, great. So we are planning by the end of the 2031, for example, we are planning to include several health data, starting by prescriptions and electronic health records, and they will be available through the European Health Data Space. In the future, they are also planning to include registries, biobanks, clinical data, medical imaging data. So the European Health Data Space will cover many different types of health data in the future. Now the question is how we can get access to this data through the European Health Data Space. So they are planning to have national bodies that they can go through all the applications, and by using these bodies, we can easily get this data from the European Health Data Space.
The experience has learned with the GDPR that in case that a national something is being put in between, that you can have quite a disparity between the way to access this data. Is that now taken away, that autonomy, is that taken away, or could that still exist, that it would be easier in some countries than in others to get hands-on data?
So all of the European member states will have to follow the same regulations. So the data will be anonymized, and I mean, by having these bodies in the future, we can easily obtain them.
And when you say anonymized, is that then fully anonymized? And in some cases, that means the data cannot be given up because there's no way to fully anonymize certain data.
They can either be anonymized or pseudonymized. It depends on the data.
Okay. There's a question from Stephen Burke who asks, can you comment on how you see the integration of non-regulated, non-clinical validated consumer wearable health data, which can provide valuable baseline data of human health or humans' health or transition into disease?
Yes.
Hi everybody. Sorry, I think I might answer that at least partially. This is a very good question because indeed we think there is a lot of value in the wearable data, but of course, as of now, the obligation for the to put the data into the European data space would be mostly on hospital and member states. So it's not at the moment foreseen to force companies to put those data there at the moment. But of course, it's a very good idea, and if it's possible, it would be very useful. And the point there is that if the data are not validated, then we will need help from the scientific community to understand what to do with data, which might not be in agreement between the other, but it's in itself a very interesting question. Will
individual patients be able to contribute data themselves?
They will go at the beginning through the hospitals.
Okay. Okay. And then maybe one last question, and then we need to move on. How do you see it? Because now there's data standards and everything being developed, and also metadata. But we've seen in the past, also in the context of the VHT roadmap, that if you don't bring along the people that are then actually going to use the data, for instance, to build models, that sometimes crucial information might be missing from whatever metadata that you agree upon and from the quality standard that you agree upon. Is that taken into account at all in the EHDS at the moment?
So at the moment, the EHDS is a complex body of legislation. So now it's been the main act has been approved, but all the implementing act still needs to be drafted. And of course, before the drafting and during the drafting, there is a comitology approach where the member states and the other entities can intervene. So yes, indeed, I agree with what you say. There is need for a broader consultation to then decide exactly which metadata should be there.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all from the question side.
So now we have Mario's presentation. I will share again the screen. Okay. I hide this. Okay.
Super. So thanks a lot also to the colleagues that helped setting up this, and thanks for inviting us. And I'm very happy, Liz, to see you and to all the other people that some of them are very known and names and very good friends. So the cut that we tried to give to this one was more how we could help, we work together toward making sure that AI is actually useful for in silico medicine. So I will explain briefly some of the ways that came up to our mind, but we are happy to have a discussion on this. Well, the first part is you might ask what is exactly that we do with all these reports and why we actually produce this report. And the idea is that if you have a look at this slide, many of these topics will probably be something that you work day to day. And so our idea is that by creating these summaries and putting in a format and bringing up to our colleagues in the policy DG, we actually make them aware of all your findings. And we can also raise some of the excellent points that, for instance, Lisbeth and the other colleagues raised before. So I think also you can think us about a vehicle to discuss science and bring it to the policy level more easily. some example of, let's try to open some of this box and see in detail what's in there. So, for instance, the first one was the Generative AI Outlook report. It was presented April last year, and I think this was very interesting because actually this is something that we created here in the JRC, and it has several chapters. A chapter was specifically on health, and this directly informed the PLAI strategy and in a way his contribution to the virtual human twins. And then there is in the strategy there are the advanced screening center network, support the use of GenAI in health, securing supercomputing power, and finally data integration, as my colleagues explained just before. An additional example is on the impact of AI in science. This is another report we prepared together for RTD, trying to map how AI can and should enter in each one of the steps from the science, which are the cavets, which are the guidelines, and how the Commission could support this. And so with the hope that this information then helps the researcher doing better science quicker. A third aspect is more was in this report is more, for instance, when you speak with health about with an LM, can you trust it? And this is a complex question because of trust has several dimensions. Some of them is factual accuracy, but there are some other aspects that also needs to come into the aspects. An additional one that was directly connected to that was a little bit our analysis on research scientific assistance. Here the idea that, I'm sure this is your day-to-day happening, is that there are so many papers, so many informations, and reading and making them, extracting insight from them is very difficult. AI can really help that. But again, how can you be sure that when you ask questions, a chatbot is answering completely incorrectly? So here we elaborate some ideas and some experiments on how to score the systems and make them sure that you can really trust and have a good use of that. And here, one of the aspects that is central to this is human oversight. So instead of going just for automatic response to something where each of the agents can collaborate together with the scientist, and then you as a scientist can enter each one of these topics, open them up and test if you like the way this is going or not. This is an example of an activity that we have, which we'll be very happy to collaborate with you also on the validation, understanding if it is useful, and how also which is your thought on that, because you as the main scientist will probably have a lot of interesting feedback on this toolbox. And another example is this AI in cardiovascular care report that we prepared. You're probably aware that the Commission prepared a strategy for safe hearts very recently. And there, in this report, we worked together with some researchers, organizing some of them, some workshop to understand a little bit which was the possible impact of artificial intelligence research in cardiovascular care, which were the gap, and which was somehow, if you see here, we have two axes in which we try to map with the help of scientists and doctors, each one of these capability, both on the readiness and on the impact side. This kind of activity we're very happy to do also more specifically for the virtual human twins. It would be a pleasure for us together to organize a workshop, to discuss the topics more in specific, and to contribute to the lively debate on this. Specifically, a topic that I'm sure you will find also very interesting is the integration between AI models and the computational models, which we are very, very happy to have the discussion more in depth with the whole community. Now, another aspect on while it's always possible to contribute together with the scientific research and prepare something together, these two aspects I think are what could be more structured. One is more on the evaluation and of AI and computational models in health, and the other one is more on the European health data space. So for the first one, here without entering into the more complex validation for the regulation part, here what we are preparing is a system where we could concentrate all the activities about AI in health life science. It's mostly intended for AI models, but we thought actually when preparing this presentation that it would be very interesting also to have your opinion on board. And the idea here is that colleagues, scientists in the future could be able to submit experiments to this system, have pipeline working so that they can be connected to dataset models and then validations, a leaderboard that to which in principle a policy analyst could go and ask, or a doctor could go and ask which is the best way to solve this problem with AI or a computational model, and can find here some information that helps their decisions. And exactly this is about the briefing that I was saying. So this is a possibility that we will be happy to invite you if there is an interest. And the second one then is more on the European data space, as my colleague was explaining here, as we are helping a little bit shaping this. And this is very interesting also to have your involvement there, as exactly the previous question clearly showed that there is an interest and there probably will be a lot of value in what you say. Specifically, if at some moment you think it could be valuable to use the HDS as a secondary use as a basis for fostering the research of virtual human twins. Well, I think this is just a very quick panorama, so I will leave time for the question and very happy to interact later. Oh, sorry.
Thank you very much. There is a question that says, I'm not sure what, yeah, that's from Sarah, who asks, who's not sure that this is a relevant question, but is there some thought to provide more services to large medical cohorts to be able to reuse data? This might allow better longitudinal studies and allow to put health and environment variables together over a period of time.
Okay, that I didn't really understand. So the question is whether we would like to finance studies or whether there is, sorry, what didn't understand.
Or provide services. You were talking about services provided to different ways of the community, and different ways to the community. And this is to large medical cohorts to be able to reuse the data that is there.
That's a very interesting
for longitudinal studies, yeah.
Very interesting point to discuss later. I'm not completely sure at the moment, but please, if they can reach later with an email or something, we'll be happy to discuss it further.
Okay, and then maybe a question I was going to ask a little later, but you mentioned several times we'd be very happy to engage on this and on that, so people can just send you emails to say, hey, this is what I'm doing. How can I collaborate with you?
Yes, sure. Yeah, I don't know what the colleagues think, but for us, we'll be very happy to.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely. That happens. So actually, so we are always happy to hear from you. Of course, then the request must be aligned with the priorities in our activities, in our work plan, and so on. But we have plenty of collaboration with external scientists of different type of different stakeholders. So not only academia researchers, but also industry, startups, innovators. We have a wide range of external collaborators. So you can always reach out to us. Yeah.
Yeah, and then maybe a question on behalf. Sometimes you see in project applications that it says engagement with JRC is encouraged, which of course, being from the commission itself, you cannot be participant in most of the projects. How would an engagement then work?
No, so okay, so in general, we of course cannot be funded partners or even partners of the project proposal, of course. But we can, after I'm speaking of the EU funded project, of course, but after the grant is awarded, the project consortia can reach out to us and we can become part in many forms of the project, partner of the project, like depending, of course, on the case, on our capacities and so on, like advisors, observers, or even be more involved also in the scientific side. We can even give access to our laboratory with our high throughput screening and other laboratories we have here at the GRC. For example, but Alex, in his presentation before, mentioned the Horizon Europe call on NAMS, specifically on NAMS, that was just recently closed, and in there there was a mentioning that engagement with the JRC was really encouraged, and that it meant also before. So we had meetings with consortia just to, of course, Alex, maybe I see you here. Do you want to say a word because you manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a very good question. So following up on, yes, do feel free to email us. The interpretation to have of those notes that are on the calls that JRC should be involved, what we recommend is definitely to reach out to understand what that means, because we are absolutely aware of to what extent we can collaborate and when to collaborate. And following up on the information that Sarah was just saying, both for the EIC call that I mentioned and for the Horizon Health and for other European calls where that note is added to it, that means that we are very open to work with the funded projects. And then, of course, depending on the level of alignment and feasibility also, alignment with the JRC mission and feasibility related to our resources and to our goals, we will collaborate more intimately as participants, direct with defined tasks, or as advisors. So that varies a lot, but it's defined right after the project is successfully funded or successfully awarded.
Awesome. Thank you. In light of the time and there are no more questions from the audience, maybe we can move to the next presentation.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The last one. Thank you very much for your patience. So here, okay. Should be in full screen mode now. So I will talk to you about in silico medicine from potential to practice, and let's see what I meant with this title. So Alex already mentioned at the beginning of the day in this presentation that in silico medicine is increasingly recognized and supported by EU policies. You already mentioned the EU Life Science Strategies in the Biotech Act, where among the NAMs, in silico methods are explicitly mentioned among the key technologies that enable European innovation and competitiveness in these fields. Then again, Alex already mentioned this EIC Advanced Innovation Challenge, which, by the way, was a huge success. They had a lot of applications, and in there, among the NAMs explicitly that included in silico models for biotech and medtech applications. Then I also wanted to mention the European Virtual Human Twins Initiative, with which the VPH community, I'm sure, is very, very familiar. This is an initiative led by our colleagues in the Commission in DG Connect, and they are funding through this initiative together with the Research and Innovation Directorate projects on the development of digital twins models, but also they are creating a collaborative platform where model developers can upload their virtual digital twin models, and also other stakeholders can use the platform. And in this way is also a way to try to reduce the fragmentation of the ecosystem around digital twins technologies in the EU. And then, importantly, in silico approaches are also more and more recognized as a valid tool also by regulators. So earlier this year was the release of this ICH M15 guideline on general principles for modeling for drug development. And this is a, I would say, very needed harmonized guideline for industry on how to report in silico generated evidence in their dossier for the approval of new drugs, for example. And I would like also to mention this interesting news that actually now it recently closed, but the EMA launched an open consultation on a qualification opinion on the use of virtual control groups to help reduce animal use in medicine development at the preclinical stages of drug development. And this is very interesting, first of all, because this would be the first NAM approved for preclinical testing. And interestingly, it is the use of virtual control groups. And the second reason is that this is the result of the Victor project, which is a EU-funded project. And this is a perfect example of the importance of the interaction between project consortia developing innovative methods and regulators and EMA early on to then make their models fit for regulatory use. And then I would also like to add that a couple of years ago, you may remember that it was published the Draghi report, so-called, so the report on the future of European competitiveness. And the key issue in there was identifying the fact that in recent years, the EU has become less attractive to run clinical trials. So in this report, there is a specific recommendation to regulators that should aim to boost the attractiveness of the EU for conducting clinical trials and expedite access to market for novel medicines. So this recommendation now translated in the ACT-EU initiative for accelerating clinical trials in the EU, and which has until now very much focused on making easier to run multi-country clinical trials, reduce the bureaucratic burden, let's say, which is sorely needed and very important. But I believe that in this purpose of expediting the access to market of novel medicines, there is a great role to play for in silico methods, so in silico trials and clinical trials approaches to be integrated. And so we are looking also to understand how to make these, from their potential to really an application. In here you see a representation that we recently proposed in a study we published of the computational model life cycle. What is that? So of course it's not the only possible representation, but we just said that, and it was reflected in our presentation today, that in silico models are used in the life sciences, health and healthcare across very different stages and in different applications. So this was a way for us to have a representation to help us break down the possible stages where these models are used and identify in each stage what are the opportunities, the challenges, and also the strategies for those models that want to translate from one stage to the other. So, and this framework, we are using it also to frame our activities in the field. So for example, in basic and applied research, we have now ongoing a study on understanding which models and methods are available, what alternative methods, let's say, are available for the cardiovascular research, for example, to understand if some of those models are ready to, for example, substitute, replace animal models. And we thank again the VPH that helped us spread the word about our call for experts that we have for this project. Then in the industrial R&D sector, we want to understand if there is something missing that would enable a wider uptake of these technologies, for example, guidances for industry that would allow more confidence in the use of in silico approaches. And then there is the use in preclinical and clinical applications. So what factors may make models regulatory ready for regulatory application, or make them ready to be integrated as clinical support, clinical decision support. And we come back to a question that we had earlier. So now, so we have a wide spectrum of interests in the field. And today I will show you an example of a study we are conducted focused on digital twins for clinical decision making. So we know their potential in supporting personalization of treatments, for example, and we know that there are many solutions, very nice, with very good results developed at the research level. Some of these solutions are transitioning to commercialization. So we have increasing number of startups developing digital twin products. But then there is quite a bottleneck also in the clinics, because the uptake there is quite limited still. And we know there are several factors that can affect this their uptake, and not limited to the one that you see in this slide, but the main ones are technical factors. For example, the difficulty sometimes to introduce some of these models in clinical workflows, or difficulties in accessing and using and managing data. Then in some areas we have a lack of fields, a lack of harmonized frameworks for conducting model credibility assessment. And then there is all the topic of the trust of clinicians and patients, and ethical factors on the reuse of health data, the bias of health data set on which models are built, the need of human oversight, and so on. And then a fourth very important factor is the evaluation of the economic impact. So I found it very interesting in the recent report of the European Innovation Council, the EIC. There was a comment in there that a difficulty in also having funds for these new startups of digital twins in demonstrating their economic impact into the workflows, their impact in clinical workflows, and the cost they bring, or the cost saved with their integration in the clinics. So this is an important factor enabling the readiness to the adoption of these technologies. So we want to conduct an analysis on these factors to really understand which of these factors is more important, what is to be prioritized to really boost the uptake of the digital twins in the clinics. And we will focus in this project that we are really starting these days, we will focus on cardiovascular digital twins for quite a few reasons. So the first one is that new tools for preventing and treating cardiovascular diseases is a top priority now for the EU, which recently published the Safeguards Plan, because 60 million people are affected by cardiovascular diseases, which is the first cause of death in the EU, with almost 2 million people dying every year. So in the Safeguards Plan, in addition, there was a specific action dedicated to increasing the investments in research and uptake of AI and other computational and digital twin solutions for personalized prevention and care in the cardiovascular field. So we decided to focus on cardiovascular digital twins, and we want to conduct an analysis on the readiness and the uptake of these technologies in different EU geographical areas. And we will focus on the 3 pillars that are also identified in the Safeguards Plan, so prevention, detection and screening, and treatment and care. So we will conduct this analysis by interviewing different stakeholders. So we will start with startups, so innovators, model developers, and understand their experience in bringing their technology to market. So we will gather scientific and technical details of the model, their strategy for model credibility assessment, what were their interactions with clinicians and patients, what is also their feeling in this interaction, and what was their plan for conducting the economic assessment of their technology. Then we want to interview clinicians, but also we hope to be able to go to hospitals and see really how these models are integrated and practically used. So, and we want to understand from clinicians why they chose to use digital twins and how they are using them. So we want to know what is the practicalities of the integration of these models in the clinical workflows, how much they trust model predictions from a scientific point of view, but also then their trust in terms of how much they rely on the prediction of the models, and what they feel is the patient's perception on the use of these technologies, and also the perceived impact on their workload. And the third stakeholder is hospital health technology assessment units or value analysis committees, so depending on what applies to each structure, but we really want to go there and understand what is the fact. So with them, we will focus on the fourth factor of the ones that I mentioned here. So we want to really understand what evidence make them decide to integrate digital twins solution in their premises. So what made them do a positive evaluation of the economic and workflow impact of these technologies in their structures. So by gathering the feedback from these 3 main actors in here, we hope to gather insights on the ecosystem and hopefully come up with actionable points to improve digital twin uptake and inform future EU policies to prioritize maybe some aspects rather than others to really boost the uptake of digital twins technologies in the healthcare. So before I conclude my presentation, I would like to mention that we, the JRC, we are organizing 2 workshops in the context of the BPH conference that will be in Milano in September, and I'm sure all of you will be there. So the first workshop is really focused on how to leverage and what also participants to the workshop would like to have more inside EU policies for driving research and innovation in the field and making EU at the center of the competitive landscape of these technologies. So we will have keynote speakers from EU policy making directorates and agencies. So we will have people from the DG Research and Innovation, Connect, from the European Innovation Council, and from EMA. And then we will have panel discussions with them, but also a diverse group of stakeholders, so academic researchers, model developers, startups, pharma industry clinicians, startup incubators, to really try to touch all the key points to really make these the use of these technologies more real in the healthcare ecosystem. And then the second workshop is more focused on the 3R applications, so where in silico models and other NAMs can really be used to implement the 3R principles. And in here we will have hands-on practical activities on the main topics I put here, using in silico models to reduce and replace animal testing, integrating research data and regulatory application, and best practices for the standardization of NAMs. So I hope to see many of you there. This workshop will be on the first day, the Tuesday, the 1st of September in the afternoon, and participation is complimentary, but just make sure when you register to the conference to tick the box and sign up for participating in these workshops. So that's all from me. Thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any question. Let me go here. Okay.
Thank you, Sarah. So don't see any questions immediately, but I think this should really trigger people to consider always now from the future JRC
Yeah,
as,
if I can,
as a source of information.
If I can add something,
Sure.
speaking of collaborations, this project on digital twins, as I said, is starting these days. So if you recognize yourself in some of the actors and stakeholders that I mentioned, make sure to email us. We will be very happy to include you in the study and gather your experience. Yeah, I know this is the right community for this call.
Yes, we could, and we will definitely strengthen that message again in communication. The conference will help. And
sure.
maybe can you explain a little bit on how you intend to align with, for instance, the building of the VHT net, of the VHT advanced simulation platform, where lots of the things that you identify as bottlenecks should actually be addressed from a technical point of view to help people overcome these hurdles while they are developing their tools?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, as said, the building of the platform is managed by colleagues in other directorate with which we have collaboration. So, and by the way, they will also join us in the workshop in September. What we do is, so right now, their focus is rightly on the building of the platform. So, and now this project I just mentioned is more focused on the last mile, right? The uptake. But I agree that these factors should be taken in consideration early on. And I know colleagues are, but we precisely hope that the insights that we will gather with this study, we will for sure report this back to colleagues taking care of the platform, because we believe that when building it is already important to have in mind the final use of because you can have the perfect virtual human twin in there, but if then it's difficult to translate it and use it, it's that's probably not the final goal. So yeah, the aim, that's also what the GRC is for, right? Hearing from you, collaborating with you, and conducting our self-scientific research that then goes back to our policy colleagues and shape the actions of the commission.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question from Visa Swami, who is asking, are there any activities at JRC related to applying in silico techniques for medical device testing, validation, or development? So specifically, in this case, physiologic closed loop control devices.
Okay, so this is a very specific question. I don't have the question under my, okay, sorry. Let me read it again. Okay, so right now that I'm aware of, at least my unit, not specifically in this thing, but as said, we are very physiologic closed loop control. No, actually, I'm not really working directly in this, but for sure it sounds like something we could be interested in. So in the we can look into that more and see if it falls within some activities that we have going on.
Yep. And then there was a question from Mark for the first presentation of Alexander on whether there is a set of example context of uses that has been published, including additional information about model qualification would also be really helpful. Mark is heavily involved in the ASME VMV40, and where they are also doing something similar in the examples that are available at the end of the ASME VMV40 standards for medical devices.
Yeah, that's a good point. You know, there are several examples of context of use related to, you know, drug development mainly. For devices, we do know and we're aware of guidance on modeling for that purpose. Specifically for this application, it's not my field, as I mentioned earlier. I know I'm more from the toxicology side, from the drug development side, but I do know I do have colleagues that, or former colleagues that work on this, and if you reach out, we can definitely talk about it. But overall, this is a very important point. Context of use can be published, you know, for example, cardiotoxicity, the ICH S7B. There's lots of publications to develop new tools to predict arrhythmia, right? The context of use is clear, is well defined, is published. But overall, what we recommend is to first identify the applicability and then build on what are the key components of the context of use regarding that applicability, the type of outputs, the platform to use, the limitations, the expected outcome. So there's several critical attributes that define context of use. Yeah.
I think the spirit of the question is also to help people realize, how do I do that? How do I define the applicability? So by having a use case there, you see, okay, this is one way of doing it. And of course, it's always different for every application, but getting a few examples helps to realize what detail, also level of detail, and what can and cannot be included.
There's publications on that. You know, the one I just mentioned, S7B, it starts by defining the decision-making need. You know, we do focus a lot on regulatory needs because we work intimately with regulatory agencies and around regulatory questions. So that can be a good example, defining well the regulatory need, for example, to assess if a drug or a substance has a pro-arrhythmic potential at a therapeutic dose, you know, and what is the risk for that associated to taking that drug. So that defines the need, and then basically set up and establish the mechanistic requirements of the model to make that prediction and to assess that risk. So, for example, pro-arrhythmia is highly dependent on ion channel activity and the interaction of drugs with ion channels and how that affects electrophysiology. So that sets up the mechanism, and then also come up with a framework that relates the mechanism to the clinical outcome. So I think that defines what your tool should have, or you know, what you need to model, what you need to consider, the components that need to be added to the model. And then also having specific cases, you know, in pro-arrhythmia, there are compounds with known effects, and there's already some clinical data on the effects of those specific drugs that can be used to validate or to test the model as positive, negative controls, you know, as basically test articles to calibrate the model. So I think in general terms, this would be the way, you know, that the examples that exist follow. I can, you know, if you reach out to me, I can give you publications on those and on others that exist in the field.
Yes. Thank you. I think there's a comment from Michael Guinea from DG Connect that indeed DG Connect is planning an uptake incubator activity to address the last mile. The platform delivery is not independent of the use cases, rather exactly the opposite. So real world use cases are driving the development of the platform. And he also thanks you for the presentations. There is a question that we posted in the internal chat from patient advocate Steve, who asks, can you comment on why you have neglected to involve patient public as a key stakeholder?
Yeah, I saw that in the chat. Thanks for the comment. Yeah, so I guess we, when we conceived this project, we were thinking on we started from the technical side. So we started from technical model validation because it's also where I come from. We were always talking about that part. We included we plan on getting a sense of the patient perspective by interacting with clinicians. But thank you for your comment. We will reflect more on, probably trying to engage also more the patient's perspective on this. And if you could, I don't know, because sometimes I have to say, me personally, I've not yet interacted with so it would be good to know probably also the knowledge of this digital twin solutions, how they are known to the patients, I'm sure that patient advocate groups are aware probably of these new technologies, but it would be also good to know how the general public is aware of these technologies and how on the patient side this is perceived. So yeah, thank you for your comment.
With VPH, we try to engage with people like Stephen and other organizations to really capture that aspect, and also develop the tools that are needed in order to further this understanding.
Yeah,
so
we should definitely follow up on this.
Yeah. And then there is another question from him. What is your vision for sustainable in silico digital twin tools from the lens of social, economic, and environmental? And who are the most suitable stewards of that? Academia, government, NGOs, public listed companies, or others?
Okay, that's a difficult question. I don't think I have an answer. Yeah, to that. And sustainability can mean many things. Yes, you mentioned the social, the economic, because yeah, sometimes. So my answer is that I don't have an answer right now, but just reflecting is. Also social can be also the ethical aspects, no? Because sometimes models are trained and built using data of the some groups that are more represented historically in, I don't know, clinical trial data or hospital records, and that's a known issue that can affect then the use of these models for more diverse populations. So that for sure must be taken into account. Economical, yeah, it is envisioned that maybe digital twins can help in this, alleviate the economic costs to reduce trial and errors, procedures, and so on. But this really, that's why also we want to understand the economic side of the use of these technologies, the economic assessment for the uptake of these technologies. And yeah, environmental, yeah, I know what you mean, like the big AI models that that's a whole topic by itself probably. So I don't know, just reflecting together, because this is really a difficult question that should be addressed. Yeah.
Yes. And then one last question from Janaki, who asked, JRC seems to be involved in exploring regulatory sandboxes to promote innovation in other fields, like in net zero technologies. Is there an interest to explore this for the healthcare sector? So regulatory sandbox for medical devices or for medicines?
So I don't know if my colleagues are aware of some specific examples, because I know these activities will go on and are more and more proposed for innovative methods and test methods, but I'm not aware of some activities already going on.
No, exactly, Sarah, you're right, because indeed the regulatory sandbox is more defined at the level of the data protection office. So it is the data protection office that usually defines the sandbox. So we as a JRC, we are not defining one specifically, but we'll be definitely interested in joining the discussion on where and how to open and how to operate it.
I guess in the monitoring of projects, there are also quite some regulatory sandbox projects in this space that might pop up in the monitor or in the radar that you're doing. And then before closing off, we still have 40 people left. One last question on behalf of all the junior people attending here. If they think, wow, this is a great environment, I want to work there, or I want to at least spend some time there, how should they go about this? What are the possibilities for this?
So first suggestion, type on Google JRC traineeship, because we are opening twice a year a call for traineeship, where I think the minimum requirement is to have a bachelor degree, not even a master, but yeah, and you can apply for a 5 months traineeship at the JRC. That is quite a good entry level to gain confidence with the JRC and what we do. And then, yeah, there are if you monitor EU careers online, that's where positions to work at the JRC are published. But and then the journey to come here, it's very, I guess, for the four of us, we have all a different story.
Sorry, Sarah, I think you might mention the visiting scientist opportunity, which is also very nice.
Yeah.
So just for you to know, there is we are able to host scientists. So if you are interested to spend some time, we can organize a visiting scientist application, which you can come and, as Sarah was saying, participate to our research or use the labs, or we can define something together.
Awesome. Great. There are a few more remarks, but maybe given the time, we can forward the people to you and bring them in touch with you so that you can have conversations directly. Any last words before we end the seminar?
Thank you for inviting us for having this webinar. It was a pleasure. And yeah, thanks also to all the people who attended.
It was great having you here, and we look forward to keeping this collaboration. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Have a lovely weekend, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.